Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I've got a great one for you today. We're going to talk about planned ignoring. And what that is when you're given the guidance to ignore your child when they're acting out. And the idea behind it is that if you ignore your child, you won't reinforce that acting out behavior. And what I want to talk about today is just a little bit more about what planned ignoring is, why it won't work well for your autistic child, and what you can do instead. So if that sounds good, let's jump in. Let's use an example to illustrate what planned ignoring is. Say your child throws a tantrum when they don't get what they want, and you might be told to just ignore that outburst and walk away. And the thinking is that the child will eventually learn that tantrums don't work. And here's why I take issue with planned ignoring. It's because it assumes that your child has full control over their behavior and is acting out on purpose in order to achieve a goal, such as getting a reaction, getting control, getting access to an item. But for many autistic children, especially when they're overwhelmed, that's just not the case at all. And here's something that I've noticed in my work with parents. We often, out of habit, assume that when our child is acting out or having some sort of meltdown, that they're being defiant or they're being lazy or they're wanting their own way. And while initially their behavior might start out that way, oftentimes what happens is that their emotions escalate to a point where they exceed their self-regulation. And so your child ends up in a state of meltdown because they actually don't have the self-regulation skills to manage those emotions. So what I'd like to encourage you to do is when those feelings come up, when you see your child in a meltdown state and you're thinking, oh, there they go again, they're doing this intentionally to get the candy in the grocery store, whatever it is, stop yourself for a second and ask again, wait, is that really true? Is my child being lazy or defiant or acting out on purpose? Or are they struggling in some way that perhaps I don't fully understand? This mindset shift is crucial because when we believe that our child is being difficult on purpose, it leads us down a path of frustration and turning to ineffective strategies such as planned ignoring. Sometimes we even use threats or punishment when we have those beliefs. But when we're able to see their behavior as a sign of stress or distress, we realize they're not trying to manipulate us. They're communicating that something is too much for them right now. Think about it for a moment from the child's perspective. When they're in distress and overwhelmed and we walk away, it can send the message that their emotions aren't worthy of attention, that there's something wrong with their emotions, and they can feel abandoned. And if you think about it, if it were truly the case that they were just doing something for the reaction and they didn't get it, it would end pretty soon. But that's not usually what happens with our kids, right? It starts at some low level. It might start out as the intent to get some sort of reaction or item, but it then evolves into such overwhelm that it goes on and on and on. That's what parents tell me, the meltdown lasts forever. If it were truly intentional just to get a reaction, they would let it go sooner because they'd realize, well, that didn't work, right? So what should you do instead? Well, instead of walking away, the goal is to stay connected with your child. You don't have to reinforce the behavior or give them the item that they may be seeking, but you also don't need to completely withdraw your attention. Sometimes our children just need for us to be there with them, sitting with them quietly, offering a calm, soothing presence. Again, we don't need to engage in the conversation, but our presence helps them feel supported. If your child would benefit from taking some deep breaths or a little bit of massage, that might also be something you can offer. It's not reinforcing the behavior, it's helping them to self-regulate. And then finally, you want to offer like a simple statement acknowledging their emotions. Something like, I can see that you're having a really hard time right now. It can go a long way, right? Even if they can't respond, knowing that you see their distress helps them feel understood and less isolated. I want to address some of the concerns you may be having. So first you might be thinking, if I don't ignore the behavior, I'm just reinforcing it. And that's a valid concern. It is the foundation of many behavioral approaches. But what I want to urge you to think about is that by staying connected with your child when they're in distress, you're not reinforcing the behavior, you're actually addressing the source of the behavior, which is their emotional dysregulation. They're not acting out to manipulate you, they're having a hard time managing their big emotions. Another common objection is parents often wonder, won't this make my children more dependent on me? I want them to be independent. And I get it. We want to raise independent kids who can manage challenges on their own. But the truth is that independence doesn't come from ignoring their distress or forcing them to figure it out on their own. It comes from meeting them where they are and helping them build the skills that they need to be able to grow that independence to manage their own emotions. If we ignore them when they're in distress, not only do they not learn how to self-regulate, but we risk sending them the message that their emotions are too big for anyone to handle, including themselves. Another concern that parents have is they say, what if I don't set limits? Won't my child take advantage of me? But again, the approach isn't about removing limits or letting your child do whatever they want. Boundaries are still important, but there's a difference between setting limits and ignoring your child's needs. You can still hold boundaries while helping your child navigate their big emotions. For example, if they're very upset and they start throwing things, you can go sit with them, hold them, and say, I can see how upset you are. I'm going to help you calm down so that you don't throw things. You're setting the boundary. You're not going to let them throw things, but you don't have to do it with anger or punishment. You're helping them manage their emotions. Sometimes parents are concerned that if they give their child attention when their child is seeking attention through bad behavior, that they'll just encourage them to keep acting that way. But what I want you to consider is if your child is genuinely needing attention, we want to find a way to give them that attention without having them need to behave that way to get it. Other things you can do, for example, would be to ignore your child's behavior without ignoring your child. I'll give you an example. This is a great example from a mom I worked with. Her son was sticking his fingers down his throat to make himself gag. And he knew that totally grossed out his mom. And he knew that he would get her attention that way. And he found her reaction funny. So instead of just completely ignoring the behavior, I suggested a different approach. She could calmly say to him, hey, I see you doing that, and I'm not going to react to it. But if you want to do something fun, we can play a silly game together. That way, what she's saying is, if you want my attention, if you want me to behave in a way that's funny, we can totally do that, but you don't have to do it by sticking your fingers down your throat. Does that make sense? Why this works is that it acknowledges the child's need for attention without feeding the negative behavior. So you wouldn't be ignoring your child's needs. Instead, you're redirecting their attention in a positive way. So this approach helps your child understand that they can get your attention through positive interactions instead of using behaviors that you would rather discourage. This approach is about helping your child build the skills they need to manage their emotions and behavior in the long term. So by staying connected during moments of distress, you're teaching your child that they can come to you when they're overwhelmed and that you'll help them get through it. Planned ignoring, on the other hand, it doesn't build those skills. It focuses on extinguishing the behaviors without addressing the underlying causes. And that can lead to more frustration for the parent and the child. So I'm in favor of not feeding the behavior, but not ignoring your child either. I think it's about understanding where the behavior is coming from and addressing it with compassion and support. I believe our children want to behave well, but oftentimes they can't. And when they can't, it's up to us to help them build the skills to do so. If you're ready to learn how to support your child's emotional regulation and behavior with compassion and support and strategies that work, you can go ahead and book a call. My information is below. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.